Episode 1. Oh, so excited to get into this.
It's a doozy for sure.
Oh, such a doozy. I'm so excited. So this podcast is going to be a little bit different from what Top Shelfers normally produces. For most of you that comment, unfortunately, we don't have the comment screaming up because we need our information as well. Yeah. But wait till the end of the episode. We have a lot of cool new things coming our way, so that'll be a lot more fun. Trust me. Just wait till the end. But today, starting our first ever episode, who are we going to talk about, Wes?
Oh, man. So, probably one of the most terrifying people that's ever existed in my eyes.
Honestly, learning about him, I would put him as, like, top 5 scariest human beings
Even
ever.
just thinking about it, I'm getting the chills because, it's so... You know, we hear things in the media, right, of just awful things going on and terrifying things, and then you read stuff like this
and you're like,
oh
okay.
No, this is the cesspool.
You're like, this is it.
So the individual for our first topic on this pilot episode is John Wayne Gacy,
which I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard about it I was like, oh yeah, killer clown, scary. Learning about him, I was like, I understand now.
It takes a whole different dive because everyone knows he's the killer clown. He used to perform. Yeah. That is just like...
That's little...
To be honest, the clown stuff isn't even bad.
No.
The clown stuff is a highlight.
Yeah. It's only just like what makes him stand out a little bit more. Yeah. Besides,
Jeffrey Dahmer eats people. John Wayne Gacy's a clown. But there's so much more. So to give you a brief description of who John Wayne Gacy is and why he's famous... He's a convicted serial killer and sex offender who is charged for the murder of 33 young men and boys. The thing is, though, is that wasn't just the only reach of his crimes. Mm-hmm. There's theories that go as far as saying that maybe even 2,000 young men have been impacted by his sexual assault.
In some way or form, yeah.
But as far as murders go, he was charged with killing 33 men in the Illinois metro or Chicago area and Waterloo, different things like that. One of the most profound things when it comes to John Wayne Gacy that the media talks about is his clown career. And, we kind of joking about it earlier. Mm-hmm. What he was to his community was an individual who was pretty great. Face value, John Wayne Gacy was an individual who not only was very successful, but did a lot of things for his community. And the thing that puts him in the public eye as far as, true crime and serial killers go is his clown persona. He had 2, I guess, pseudonames that he went by. It was Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown.
Mostly Pogo's what he's known for, but he had 2. And
he, basically what that means is he would go to charity events, children's hospitals, and different things like that, and literally just do clown work. Yeah. I believe he was registered as a
legit clown.
Like a legit clown. And we're talking just go and make kids happy. Yeah. Which you'll find out is terrifying. Now, the reason... They even covered this, kind of covered it, but used it in the popular show American Horror Story, if you guys have watched that.
Freak Show.
Freak Show.
5?
Yeah. 4? Twisty the Clown in Freak Show was kind of... It wasn't John Wayne Gacy, obviously, but I think that's where they got their inspiration for him.
Definitely. I think also, too, that's kind of the start of Fear of Clowns. Yeah. Was him. I think that, I don't know if it's fully correlated, but I would not be surprised if a majority of the reason why clowns are now so frightening is because of John Wayne Gacy.
Well, think of being a young kid in the 70s and you're hearing all the news talk about this killer clown.
And then you have a clown at your birthday party, you're like, Mom, this wasn't a good idea.
Are you sure about that?
All right. And that brings me to what every podcast lasts, a tasteless joke. All right, What did one little boy in the basement say to the other little boy in the basement?
What?
I don't know about you, but that clown wasn't funny.
It's so much better knowing that this is now live.
I apologize in advance. I know it's tasteless, but you gotta laugh. That's fucking funny.
You gotta love it.
But, okay. All right, so more on John Wayne Gacy. We're this time with the podcast, just so you guys know, we're going to do kind of more of an overall of who he is, then his crimes, capturing, trial, then like kind of ideas and some fun facts for you.
The one thing to keep in mind is stuff like this has hours and hours and hours of content. Like
so much.
We could literally sit here and talk about John Wayne Gacy for the next week.
Probably easily.
We want to compile all the information that is important and prevalent to who he is and why he became what he is, to give that to you so you can kind of get a better idea. Yeah.
So that way, because like the more you learn about him, and I guess like every like killer, abductor, whatever, you kind of, it's not that like it makes sense, but you're like, okay, like I can see kind of where things might go awry, but I think most people are inherently going to be evil if they're going to be evil. But so John Wayne Gacy, born March 17th, 1945 in Chicago, Illinois. He had didn't get his parents' name. I don't think it really matters, but he was a middle child, so he had a younger sister and an older sister. He was the middle child, and when he was born, he was actually born with a heart defect, an enlarged heart. So basically, from when he was born, and then with that enlarged heart, his dad disliked him. He thought of him as a weak child, and like especially with him being born that way, he was like, "Wow, I gave birth to a weak baby." But with that in mind, he was like, this is my first son. I need to give him a masculine name. So, of course, who are you going to call it after? The most masculine man in the world? John Wayne.
Right.
So, that's where he gets his name from, is because his dad wanted to have him, like, such a masculine name, because he wanted to have a masculine son.
Right.
Which, kind of a little bit later, we'll talk more about, like, his father in a sense of, like, he was just crazy, man. But, so, his father was an alcoholic. He beat all of them. He beat his mom the most, obviously, but John got a brunt of it because he was not the son he wanted most of the time. But so his dad beat all the kids, everybody, and to the point where John got so used to it that like his sister in interviews, it was like it was scary because he would just take it. He never cried.
Wow. He
never cried when his dad hit him. Never gave him the satisfaction, which is crazy. But so his dad also too, so John Wayne Gacy also, like, with his enlarged heart, he couldn't be physically active, so he couldn't do sports. He was in the Boy Scouts, but obviously he had restrictions.
Right.
So his dad always thought of him like as gay, and like was like, you're call him all totally race, like bad things. Like one of them I was just like, I don't even want to say on the podcast because like I don't, that he would just belittle him, and since he wasn't a man, and he would help his mom a lot around the house because he can't play outside with kids, and I think that kind of affected his social life as a child as well. But something really interesting was when he was 6 years old, he actually would steal his mom's underwear and hide it under the crawl space in their house. So, because with John Wayne Gacy growing up, his dad had, like, the garage, or the basement. He had the basement and no one can go in. And that kind of where you see where he had, like, his dad had the garage, no one went in it. If you found, like, if their dad found out you went in it, you better just leave home.
Right.
It's that kind of scary. So I think that's where John Wayne Gacy kind of got his privacy, because he was that way with his room. Like, John Wayne Gacy didn't like anyone in his room. And when his mom actually, like, I couldn't tell if this was fact or not, but, like, his mom found the underwear, and, like, to the point where she was, like, trying to make a point, like, made him wear the underwear. It was like, why do you have it? Yeah. And so, and even, like, one of his sisters found in his room, like, bags of lady underwear in the closet at, like, even when he was 13. So, like, it was kind of like a fetish of his, but not that fetish leads to being a serial killer. I just think it's really weird.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because, so as a child, he didn't really do much, and then at the age of 11, he got a head injury, and that's where a lot of, like, psychologists likes to, they do a lot of research on seeing if head injuries lead to serial killers being this way. There's no definite answer that I know of off the top of my head, but with that injury as well, he would have blackouts. So he was a really good student when he was there, and actually he was a kiss ass. He ironically loved authority. he would literally be a like the hall monitors, like, or the truancy monitors.
Right.
He would help them catch fuckers to the point. So I think he was so he didn't really like get along with tons of people in school, but he didn't have like a bad experience at school. I mean, definitely being a narc didn't help him.
No.
But he wasn't in school a lot because he had all these head injuries, and he would just straight up like have to be in the hospital for months, and that just hit his dad's anger towards him of like calling him like a sissy and like the F word and like calling him gay and like, oh, what are you, a homosexual, and like belittling him so much. And then obviously when John got older, he realized I am, but he would never let his father find out. He'd rather die.
Right.
But so as like a child, he was like pretty decent, like nothing crazy. Just he had the enlarged heart, so he didn't really have like the social outlets of having to play with kids, and like so he was home more, and so I just got him beat more. And then what was really interesting with like him when he was 17, he actually started working for like the city council.
Yeah. And
or not really the city council, but he worked with like the authorities, and he would be kind of like a helper in the first responders. And so John Wayne Gacy's dad bought him a car, and like that was also like another power he could have over Gacy, because he would just take away the car.
Right.
Give him the car, take away the car. Give him the car, take away the car. To the point where he needed to leave for like an event or something to like help out and volunteer, because he was really into volunteering and being like helpful to his community, which obviously he does later. But this last time, his dad like took out, I don't remember what it is, but it's like part of the car. It wouldn't start, and then randomly he put it back in, and John's like, see ya.
Yeah.
So
later.
So at age 17, he drops out of high school, and then he goes to Vegas. And his parents his mom was so worried about him because of his like conditions, and like I think he kind of grew out of it because he didn't have that as like in his adulthoods. It's mostly like preteens, middle school. It's like the worst time to be in the hospital all the time and not making friends. Yeah. So that was rough for him. I think that's why he liked working with adults in authority, because he couldn't play with kids. He had to like hang out with the adults.
Didn't fit in with his
and
peers.
Fit in with like he couldn't like fit in because he couldn't do anything. But the night that his dad was like gave him back the car, he left. He's like, I'm getting out. So he goes to Vegas, of all places, and he gets a job at a funeral home where they actually let him live there since he was working there. So he had a room there. I didn't realize like he actually lived there, but that's how he was able to be in Vegas. Right. Because of that. But his parents actually found like a private investigator and like found him in Vegas. Is what like I watched an interview with his sister was saying, like his mom was so worried, and then his dad's like, oh, fine, I'll go get someone to find him. Right. Which is so fucked. Especially like, but this is like the 60s, so like kids just left and that was it.
Right. We didn't have cell phones.
You didn't have cell phones with letters. Like you don't know where they live. You can't look them up online. Yeah. But at the funeral home, he would actually start dabbling into like his darker desires, because it started with like adult corpses. He would like lay with them, and like we don't really know what happened with them, but like I would assume like some weird stuff. But one of the biggest things as to why he quit that job, because he was starting to get kind of found out, but not really enough to like fire him justifiably. But one night he laid with a teenage boy instead of an adult, and he said he was like something clicked, and then he was like called up his mom. He's like, can I come home? And his mom's like, come home. Right. And so from there, he came home around, he was 18, almost 19 when he came home, but his adulthood.
The crazy thing, and I think this is also one of the most scary things about Gacy, is the fact of how successful he really was as a person.
Oh, like, yeah.
Not only did he come back home from this Vegas situation of, working in this funeral home and doing this stuff with these dead bodies, which obviously, you know, being around dead bodies in general is going to take a mental impact on you.
Yeah. But, and then also being a college dropout on top of everything else.
So when he came back, he really decided, like, as a normal person, we'll get into the not normal stuff.
persons.
He got his shit together. He attended Northwestern Business College, where he ended up graduating and getting a very good job at Bush Shoe Company, which, from my understanding, he rise through the ranks and became a manager over a time period.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, that is where he met his first wife, Marilyn Myers, I believe is how her name is pronounced. Yeah. And she was a co-worker with Gacy. I believe that she was actually under Gacy.
Yeah, I think he was managing, and they were co-workers, but he was the manager at that point.
Right, which also shows another interesting fact that maybe,
power play.
Power, yeah, he has the power, the authority.
Yeah.
Which is going to be something that you notice as a trend with Gacy as we continue down this path.
Especially as someone growing up being belittled so much and thought so little of, I think anyone coming out of that would want to be a little power hungry.
Right. On top of going to Northwestern, graduating, getting a great job, he decided to join Joyce, which is United States Junior Chamber.
Oh, so many things happened in Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce is...
Oh, dude.
If Joyce... What we learned about Joyce from this investigation, I guess we would call it, or information gathering, is that if this goes on all the time, are we really surprised politicians are so corrupt? I mean,
honestly,
it's really bad.
You can really... The Joyce is kind of what reminds me of, who's that guy that... Epstein. Kind of like that scenario where it's like people with power, money...
Right.
Doing whatever the fuck they want.
So when he joined Joyce for the first time, there isn't much information that was negative. It did sound like he was just joining it to kind of further his political interests and, kind of better himself. But later in his adult life, when he moved and rejoined Joyce in a different area, you find out some more interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah. And with that being said, Joyce was like a good community helping.
Yes.
But they did some cool, not cool, they did some interesting things on the side.
Yes.
When they weren't trying to protect their community.
Right. And one thing to keep in mind is it wasn't that just Gacy was there to hang out. Like, he became a key man, which is, I don't know if that's an actual title or just like he was a key importance to the area that he was in. And then later named the third most outstanding member across the state of Illinois for being in Joyce, which I don't know how prestigious of an award that is, but to be mentioned by him and to be mentioned by the community, it has some sort of power behind it.
It has to, because he worked so hard for them.
Right.
And to be recognized, especially political, interns are pooped on every goddamn day.
Every day.
But so to actually be recognized in a political helping and campaign is monumental.
I would think that's, if you were to want to run for politics, that's somewhere where you start.
Yeah, you start getting in with the people
and get your name out there. And from my understanding, he was putting in hours and hours and hours into this venture.
Yeah.
They were saying 14 hours and working and all that type of stuff.
That's most fun.
So after, I don't remember the exact time frame from when he was at Bush Company Bush Shoe Company, and then offered this opportunity, but through his wife's family, her parents ended up buying several KFC food chains.
Yeah, didn't they own over a dozen?
Yeah.
They owned the most in Illinois at the time.
Yeah, it was a large portion of KFC's, and her parents ended up offering Gacy a position to be a manager over these restaurants. And this also just goes to say how successful he was, because he was making bank. He really was. Yeah. Just this job, I don't know how much he was making at the shoe company, but this job offer, he was making around $15,000 per year. That's what they were estimating for other research they found, which in 2020 is about $120,000 a year.
To manage over, I think he only even did 3 KFCs.
Yeah, I think it was 3.
3 KFCs, and that's how much bastard is making.
Yeah, like
how? What? I was like, it shakes me.
Well, and on top of the fact that going back to the power dynamic, right?
Right.
Money gives you power.
Money gives you
Fucking
so much.
Fucking strong.
Gets you so much leeway.
So not only now is he a college graduate from a prestigious school, he moved up the ranks at a company already, so he knows how to manage. He knows how that dynamic works. He's married. Right? He does have kids at this point, or he's about to.
He has kids about 2 years before their divorce, so by the time he's running KFC's, I think he's had his first son.
Right.
Because he had his first son in 1967.
Right. And then on top of the fact of everything that he's doing in Joyce and politically, like, if we stop here, John Wayne Gacy's kind of the fucking man for the time period.
Yeah.
As far as going in the 60s, he is doing everything right.
Oh, yeah. And going into the 70s where it's going to be even more prevalent, like, and he can make so much more money.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy.
He's living the American dream.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that he murders and sexually assaults a lot of children and boys.
Not at this time with these KFCs, but very soon after.
Very, very soon. So to kind of end out on how I feel about his adult life before we start dabbling into why we're even talking about John Wayne Gacy in the first place, is he was a contributing member of his community. You know, he accomplished all these things, like even in today's standards would be amazing.
Yeah.
He later creates his own business, which rakes in the money.
6 figures.
Like
in today's standards, 6 figures in today's standards.
You know, he's a successful man.
He's very successful. And like you can listen to interviews like with his neighbors and like people on like city councils and like he was another big thing about him is he was a Democrat. And like another thing he thought about with his dad a lot, his dad was a Republican, so he hated the fact that he was helping all these Democrats, of course. But is that he was really big in the Democratic Party. Yeah. Like he helped like not congressman. He just helped like his local community and like to the point where he has a picture with was it Jimmy Carter's wife?
Yeah.
I forgot her first name.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter's wife can catch the inches, is what we figured out.
Okay, so fun story real quick. Yesterday we were looking at pictures of John Wayne Gacy and we saw one with a woman and I assumed it was one of his wives. I was like, man, he got a hottie for like being kind of like, you know, not the stereotypical like hot guy, but like, and then I messaged Wes today. I was like, oh my god, that's Jimmy Carter's wife.
Right.
Not his wife.
I mean, does that put things in a weird perspective though? Because when you sent that to me, I started thinking about it.
Yeah.
He had enough, unless he just went to like an event, he had enough power or sway to be able to get that close to the president's wife.
To the first lady of the United States, to like. So that's like how prevalent he was in like his community is that everyone knew him. Everyone like loved him. Like he helped out people. Like he'd give out loans, and like.
I wonder if I want to know what John Wayne Gacy's long-term plan was politically if he didn't get caught.
Yeah, I don't think he ever like planned to get into politics because I think he kind of knew he couldn't because people would start digging literally and figuratively.
Right.
But I think, but even then though, like he probably could have still though, even if it was like just city council in Chicago,
right?
You know, like something like that. I'm not really good on government, so I don't know how it all works. But I mean, but I know he would continuously help people,
right?
But from where KFC ends before he does get his own business is there was a little incident that happened, not very little, pretty big deal. But he started, and this is kind of like the start of John Wayne Gacy, is when he violated one boy first.
Right.
And then he did it again, and then the second boy got found out. Or was the reason why he went to jail. But what he did was, the first boy, you know, he raped and didn't kill but let go. And he, like, sexually assaulted, just fucked up shit. Like, I can't read half the stuff he's done to these people, these poor young men. But he did that to him, and, like, he went to the police, obviously, and then the police were, like, going to, like, you know, try him and stuff. And then Wayne Gacy actually hired people to scare that kid away to drop the charges. And so he did, until later another little boy came out. I think they were both like 15, 16. And they like kind of compared notes. And then they both went to the police. And then that's when Gacy was arrested and then charged.
It was one account of sodomy.
One account of sodomy for these two boys that he destroyed.
Yeah, they will be forever scarred.
Forever scarred. And also, I just want to put into perspective. So he went to jail in December of 1968. He did plead guilty to sodomy in 1 degree, and he got sentenced to 10 years. I just want everyone to know that, so he had a son the year before. So he got, December. In October of that same year, he had a daughter. So that means he had a 2-month-old when he got arrested and was in jail. That's where it like baffles me, is that like this guy was literally doing those to people when he was like having his own kids, like biological kids.
Right.
And so like that's where it's like, what?
It just
like because especially even like he has a young son. Like I'm just glad that he got caught, because I almost wonder what he would have done to his own son.
Oh, I know. I mean,
but for all that he does, he did say he would never lay a hand on his kids.
Right.
That was his biggest thing. He's like, when I had kids and when he had stepkids, I will never lay a finger on those kids. But because this was in Springfield when he got arrested, so that's really prevalent to remember too. So this was happening in Springfield. He's originally from Chicago, and so when he goes to jail in Springfield, he only how long did he serve the sentence for?
This blows my mind.
So crazy. 10-year sentence.
So a sexual assault charge with sodomy, sentenced to 10 years in jail or prison. I can't remember which one it is.
I think it was jail.
He served 18 months.
18 months and got out for what? Good behavior?
Good behavior, because, and I think this goes back to him knowing how politics works.
Mm-hmm.
He knew exactly what he had to do when he got in. He rise up the ranks. He became a head chef. They say that he was a model prisoner.
Yeah. To the point they're like, did you even do it?
Yeah.
Like, he was so just not even like charismatic or charming like you can say like Bendy was. He just was such a people's person that he was the man.
Yeah.
In the sense of the community. Like, he was the man.
Right. It almost seemed like people flocked to him because he was so willing to help, which turns into a very interesting point when he decides to start his own business, because it's weird that he starts hiring the type of person that he likes to sexually assault.
Yes. And so with that, it kind of goes into, so he got out, obviously. His family, weirdly enough, let him live with them. Yeah. And then that's when he met his second wife. Fuck, I don't know her name.
I don't remember.
But he married his second wife. She had 2 daughters. And so he basically got these 2 grandkids in. Oh, and his dad died pretty soon after that. That's why he was allowed back. So he went back to Chicago, got his own house, living with his wife and his mom at the time. Like, his mom lived with him up until like 3 years she got captured, because I think she was just too old. But
right.
So she had remarried, but it didn't stop there. No. And this is where it kind of like gets a little like, there's a lot of, and especially 33 murders that we know of fully.
And back to what I said early on is, we know of 33 murders. He confessed to 33 murders. Mm-hmm. It could be a lot more. It really could. I'm willing to put my name that he easily sexually assaulted thousands.
Hundreds and hundreds easily.
And how many times did he just pay off other kids to go beat up the kid
or just pay the kid? Because like another thing that he would do is like he would assault them, give them some money. Yeah. And they're like, well, fuck. Well, he did pay me. Yeah. It was bad, but like. Yeah. But so with that, like kind of going into like all of his victims, it's good to point out, and this is where like a lot of people don't know this, but before he murdered his first victim, and that's when it kind of spiraled, was he was assaulting kids before that. And like, but like it wasn't like enough investigation / enough of a crime that he got sentenced when he had it. Mostly he was charged with, what was it, attempt to rape or attempt to assault. So it was always attempts, but obviously he only served an 18-month sentence. He's on parole. A good thing to remember during this time in the early 70s, one, they didn't know about serial killers.
Right.
Two, I have it right here. Since it was an attempt, it wasn't technically a crime. And so when you're on parole, if your parole people aren't notified about your violations, it doesn't get investigated. So another thing is that's big and important also on top of that is it's a rule violation, not a law violation. So when you say Wes started selling drugs, now he's on parole, if he gets like caught with, I don't know, a joint, you're is it DEA or you're like the person who basically is a parole person, they get to decide if it's worth sending you back or just saying fuck it, because especially during this time too, the less prisoners the better.
Right.
Like they don't want to prison you unless you're of not white skin, of course, but that's how they kind of base it off of that. So since it happened in Springfield and this is Chicago, and they don't obviously know what Gacy did over there, he got away with it because no one knew about his parole. And
I really think too it's an important fact, because if the people, there was a time period where someone accused him of something and it went to court and it ended up falling through because the kid who did the accusation didn't show up. But through all of that, if they would have contacted this, like where his parole was, they would have found out everything that he's getting accused of would have gone against his parole, and he would have probably ended up back in jail.
Yeah, because it's essentially, because I don't know when sex offenders became like a thing, but like at that time, because it's a second offense of the same thing, especially against children, he would have gotten back to jail. Because I don't think he had to, because obviously he didn't register as a sex offender. Because I don't know, we should look that up at some point. When sex offending was like a thing, like a big,
somewhere you have to register for it.
Yes. Oh, I forgot the most interesting thing about his childhood. I apologize, guys. We'll be a little bit more structured next time. But another thing, and this is like we're gonna get a little bit more into this later. But when he was 7, he was also assaulted multiple times by a family friend who was a contractor. Just think about that while he's running this construction business. Yeah. So, with that, I
would like to talk about how his dad treated him before we get into the crimes. Yeah. Or at least the 33 victims and the crimes and kind of what all happened after that. The whole idea of him being gay or bisexual, as he told
claims,
his second wife.
I think he really was gay, but it was easier to swallow for himself as a person because he basically just kept lying to himself. Yeah. You could definitely tell during when he got captured, but he said bi because it's better than being full gay. So that's what he identified as at the end.
I think that during the time period, obviously, being a homosexual was very negative.
It was very frowned upon.
And that's how it used to be. Like, if someone called you gay, that's how it used to be negative. It's like, you don't want to be gay. And obviously now we're starting to realize that, that's a whole different discussion, but it's perfectly fine to be what you want to be.
Oh,
and, back then, though.
Love, but back then.
No.
Love between a man and woman was the only thing.
So you would have to hide everything. And I think mentally that is just so impactful on any human.
Oh, yeah, like having to keep such a deep, dark secret.
Right, and especially when your dad would basically call you all the words in the dictionary that were slurs towards someone towards, like, the gay community. Like, obviously he knows how bad it must be because it was imprinted from his dad. Yeah. And I think that that's very important to put out there because there was a time period when he was running the KFCs, he created this club in his house. And there's pictures online if you want to look at it. He put a tiki lounge down in his basement or something like that.
That went into the one in his real house. So he had it multiple places. He just loved that tiki lounge.
It's kind of the shit, to be honest with you.
It's the most 70s decorative bar I've ever seen. It's so all the shit he's done. Man, I had good taste.
Yep.
Because that tiki bar looks fun.
It does look fun. But one thing that he was doing is he would invite young men, and I don't know what the age range was. There might have even been kids who were, in their early 20s or whatever. He would invite them over to his house to drink and hang out and
smoke
weed and do all this type of stuff. And then when everyone gets drunk, he would try and make sexual advances. And then if it wasn't reciprocated, or the person would be like, "What are you, gay or whatever?"
Yeah.
He would play it off and be like, "Oh man, like I was just testing you, bro." Like, and I made a joke yesterday that it reminded me of like frat bros who are like, "Yo, bro, you should suck my dick." And then if he says no, like, "What are you, gay?" Then he'd be like, "No, bro, I'm just joking." Like, it really gave me that vibe, like that he would like if they would have said yes, he would have gotten what he wanted. And I don't know if that meant that he was trying to do it in a manner that wasn't sexual assault, or I don't really know why he did it that way. If that was just another twisted way of him trying to gain power.
It was just another way to manipulate, because even with his later victims, he would get them drunk, and that's how he was able to get control over them.
Right.
But we'll learn more about his hacks, because he had a system down, and it
right.
So interesting, the process. But so with that, and having inviting boys over, especially to entice them, let's watch porn.
Yeah.
Because back then you didn't really have easy access to it. So I guess honestly, if I never saw porn and someone was want to watch it, my initial reaction, now that I actually seen porn, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not gonna watch porn with you. But someone who's never really seen porn but kind of heard about it, you'd be interested. So of course especially teenage boys.
I think too the time period is really important to take into consideration, just because porn was very taboo.
Oh no, I think, wasn't it the late 60s? Who was that woman, Lovelace? Something that started the porn industry, basically.
It's still very fresh, and it's still very not American. Porn was the devil, pretty much. Same with The Devil's Lettuce and all these other things that Gacy was in. Mm-hmm. But to a 15, 16-year-old boy, Gacy would be the bro. You'd be like, dude, you're gonna fucking get me some weed and some alcohol and we're gonna watch some porn? Yeah, I'll come fucking hang out.
Yeah, or
he was an easy pitch. He could pitch to kids and these young boys everything they wanted.
He was literally Walt Disney. That's so bad to say. He was the Walt Disney to these kids, because it's shit, I get to go to Disneyland, essentially.
Right.
But obviously they don't know who he is as a person.
Right.
And the biggest turning turning point was when Gacy starting to murder was his first murder victim. There was tons of victims before, and that's why the theory that it could be 2,000 people is because how many don't get reported?
Right.
So many. And especially because before this one kid, he didn't really have his torture methods in, because he started then the torture, I think, after this kid.
Right.
Because he was he would violate super hard to the point where it is kind of torture, but it wasn't torture until he had started the murder spree. But it was Timothy McCoy. He was a 16-year-old boy, and he picked him up, obviously brought him back to his house, because I think his mom, his wife at the time, and daughters were going to go visit someone, they were going to go out, and so he had the house to himself. So he invited this little boy in. They have sex. And the thing that's also hard about kind of going over his crimes is you're really taking it to face value of what John Wayne Gacy says. And
Absolutely.
He, to the day he died, wanted to clear his name. He was very much proud of what's the word when you're your self-image, your reputation.
Yeah, your reputation.
He was almost trying to save his reputation up until the day he died. Oh. And that's why I love his last words. Anyways, but with that, he Gacy claims that they went to bed together. He woke up, he wasn't there. He goes downstairs and he sees Timothy with a knife, and that snapped Gacy. He was like, oh my god, he's gonna kill me. So he murders him, and then he noticed that there was breakfast on the table.
All right.
And that was the start of when, and I think even Gacy kind of said oh, that's kind of when I knew I wanted to take it the next level.
Right.
Murder.
And it didn't stop. I think that it just built this new whole entire like unholy thing that is giving Gacy the thrills that he needs. Because if we're being honest, Gacy, like when we talk about like evil people, they all have a reason why they're doing it. And I feel like almost before this murder, Gacy was getting to a point where he had accomplished everything in his evil mind, if that makes sense. Like he's done all this sexual assaulting, he's done all these awful things. Like I think it was getting to a point where he was bored with what he was doing and he wanted to take that next step. And I feel like even if it was the knife thing or if it wasn't the knife thing, it would still would have led to murder.
Yeah. I think his story does kind of add up though, because it would be a good excuse to instantly assume he's trying to murder him. Because also John Wayne Gacy, if you haven't seen a picture of him, he's like what, like 5, like maybe 6 foot. I don't know how tall he is.
We can look it up while you're talking.
But he's like a big dude.
Yeah.
And his first victim was a 15-year-old scrawny ass boy. So it's like, even if he had a knife, do you really... Oh, he was 5'10".
Yeah.
So 5'10" and what? 200 pounds? How much?
He was probably a little bit heavier than that.
Heavier, about maybe 250?
Yeah.
Height, weight?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to go by picture, I would say he's in between 230 and 270 on a given picture. Like,
anyways, three
he's
times the size of a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, boy. And so I think this helped him justify doing that. Like how Dahmer's excuse for now starting to murder, besides his first victim, was he accidentally killed the second victim, and he was like, well, that was nice, let's keep going with that.
Right.
You know, so I think this was kind of his excuse to be like, all right, let's keep practicing worse things.
Well, and one thing that Holly and I were talking about that we want to do on the side is kind of get into the brain of some of these serial killers. And I don't want to get into that right now because we're really excited for doing that. But I really think that serial killers and, you know, people who cause mass harm really have a different mindset. And I compare it to the TV show Dexter, where even though Dexter was a serial killer and a murderer, he had
a code.
He had a code in his brain that made it okay. And I think Dahmer, I think Gacy, I think Bundy, all these people in their head had this code to justify it. And I don't think Gacy's any different.
Yeah, no. And I think this was just the perfect opportunity to be like, well, I did it once and then obviously got away with it. I can do it again. And I think then it became almost more convenient to kill them because you don't have to worry about them narking. You don't have to worry about them, you know, telling other people.
You wouldn't have to pay more people.
Paying people off.
Yeah.
Which I think next we'll go into more of like his tactics of what he would do, because there's 33 victims and unfortunately there's like, what is it, 8 of them are not even like unknown. 8 of them are unknown from his, because there's and another big thing, if you live in the Chicago area or you had relatives in the Chicago area during the 68 to 78, they're literally still taking donations. So if you had like family members and you knew like your grandma or like your second, third cousin, they had a kid that went missing. Yeah, like if they had like say a son that went missing around the age that Gacy, because it was up to like 23 to 12. Yeah. Honestly, if you know that, you should go get tested or like, you know, give your DNA, because you might be able to solve another hidden body. Like there's just so many, there's still like 8 undiscovered boys. Like no one knows who they are.
Well, and you know, one thing I want to put out there, I mean, I'm sure, you know, we get excited about true crime because it's such an interesting subject, and sometimes it does get lost that, you know, these are victims of awful incidents, and you know, the ones who survived, I'm sure, are still scarred by the moment, and you know, their families are still suffering from the ones who are lost. And you know, all the names and stuff that we use, it's meant to be informative. It's meant to put out there that, you know, this awful person can do this, and we want to try and create history where we can learn from our past and you know, try and stop things like this from happening,
like be able to put these 8 bodies to like a name and a rest,
right?
And like, so then that way maybe they have like a sister, brother, something, because I mean Gacy's sister's still alive. I think she's 50. I don't remember how old he was 45, so he would be about my grandma's age.
Yeah.
Because that's right, because his dad was in World War I, and he missed World War II because he was just born. But, anyways, so yeah, the victims, especially, like, being able to find out those people would be...
Just to lay them to rest properly.
Lay them to rest.
And if you're in a position where you can donate and you want to find some sort of charitable organization that is helping this cause, reach out. I'll try and find one that I can link in our descriptions on all of our media just to try and help, any way
we can,
because true crime is interesting, true crime is exciting, and true crime it's the most taboo thing that still exists, and it's fun to talk about, but at the end of the day,
these are still people.
Yeah, this is a magnitude that is greater than
anything we could ever even comprehend.
Right.
But back to the tactics of, like, how Gacy would get these boys, besides, like, picking them up. But one of his biggest ones, or, like, at least, like, 3 of his victims fell prey to this, is that, especially his 3rd victim was actually, so Gacy would sometimes not pay them on time and be like, you'll get it eventually.
Before we get to that, let's talk about him starting the business, because that leads into a lot of his victims I don't remember exactly. Business. Yeah, Gacy started a construction business because he was given a lot of time from parole, right?
Yeah, it was in 1971 he started the business.
Like, he was able to get, like, a certain amount of time where he could work on this construction business, and it ended up being very successful. But why it's so prevalent is he would go and hire these young boys and men as a first job and be like, hey, come work with your boy John. I'll get you a job.
I'll pay you decent.
You come out here, you work hard.
Train.
I'll give you your money.
Oh, especially in the 70s, learning the construction trade was huge.
Oh, that could lead to a whole entire career for these young boys.
They could make their own business, Like, it was a good opportunity.
And that start of his business led to most of these 33 victims that we know of.
33 victims that we know of, yeah. And, like, one of those tactics, because he was obviously the owner and had the power, of course, he would sometimes pay him late. And so then that way he can be like, oh, hey, why don't you just come over to my house and or hey, come home with me, I'll take you and I'll write you a check, but it's at my house, come over. And that's how he got his 3rd victim is then... But the thing is, too, he was so good at manipulating and creating these situations that he could get himself out of, because with his last paycheck, because this kid was quitting, and I think he graduated high school and he was leaving, or he was just graduating high school, so he was done working for Gacy, he wanted to do something else. He gave him his last paycheck. I mean, he didn't, but he murdered him. Awful. He hid his body in the crawl space. This is where he started having the first 28 of them.
Yeah.
But anyways, so he would give them, or he would, like, entice them, like, or, like, not pay them, so that way they have to go and, like, be alone with him. But this boy in particular, since he graduated, he got his last paycheck. When he was questioned by the cops, he said, oh, I think he went to, like, he was saying, like, he was like, I'm so sick of this town and wanting to go to, like, Costa Rica or something.
Right.
He did it, like, with 3 different people, because there was one person he was like, oh, he's going to Costa Rica. One was like, oh, I think he wanted to go be a movie star in LA, which in the 70s means I'm just going to not do anything. And, like, he would just, like, make these, like, scenarios of, like, I think these, because they're old enough to the fact where
they could go do their own thing.
They can go do their own thing, because technically there's not resources of ways to find these boys that just run away. And so he would, like, fabricate where these boys are.
And it actually did turn into one of the reasons that he ended up getting caught was through him explaining that some of these boys are just leaving. Like, oh yeah, I gave him his paycheck. He was talking about moving to California or whatever it might be. He was getting left vehicles at his house or different places. And he ended up selling some of these vehicles to other kids.
Yeah.
And that, strangely enough, turns into kind of a way that he ended up getting caught. I'll explain more when we get into the investigation side of things.
But, so, and, like, another tactic he would do with, like, the boys is he would entice them with drugs and alcohol, and obviously being like, hey, come to my house, we had a long day at the office, let's blow off some steam. And his party trick, which him being a clown, he would be like, so you know I'm a clown, right? Do you want to see a trick? And so he would handcuff himself, get out of the handcuffs, and be like, now you do it. And they'd be like, okay. And most of the time when they would deny, he'd be like, all right, I'll give you like $50 if you do it. And he's like, they're like, especially $50 that time, it's like, why not? So he would then handcuff the boys, and his classic line was, they're like, okay, how do I get out? And they're like, what would he say? He's like, oh, you want to know my secret? And they're like, yeah, you have to have the keys. And then he would do his thing. And then one of his biggest ways of murder was they would be handcuffed. He did so many different things, but one of the main ones, besides the handcuff trick that basically he did every time because it worked, was he would like get a rope around his neck, and then he would either get a pipe or a piece of stick and like crank it so he can like kill him faster. Yeah. I mean, there was sometimes where he was just blatantly murdering these kids for hours. Because then you find out, too, his garage is soundproofed. Yeah. So no one's going to hear anything because it's his domain, and no one's going to go in there because no one wants to get, especially during that time, it's the man's house. Right. He's paying the bills. You don't want to interrupt, you know. But I'm not sure when his wife finally left him. I think I think they were only married like 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And then they got divorced, and then his mom lived with him until 75, and then she moved out. So it was just getting easier and easier for him to kill.
There was a point in time where, and this is where the bisexual thing came up, is he was having sex with his second wife, and he told her that this is the last time we're having sex because I'm bisexual, and I believe shortly after she ended up leaving him. And then I'm sure it was countless other things on top of just that fact. Yeah. But that is something that he specifically pointed out.
He was like, I'm not having sex with you anymore, I'm bisexual. Which, if you're bisexual...
You would think you would...
Yeah. Well, and also, too, she started noticing things about him. Like, he had gay porn, he had pornographic magazines, and then you'll learn more about, like, in the investigation part when he gets what all was in his house. But she started noticing things, and she kind of was like... Then that happened. Then she was like, I'm just going to dip. Right. This doesn't seem right. But so he would pick up boys from his job, not all the time. He would also just pick them off of street corners. Another good line he did, and this is how kind of leads up to like how he would finally get caught, is he would then be like, hey, I work in construction. You want to talk about this job? Come get in the ride with me. And then he would like chloroform, or he would take him home, try to talk to him there, and XYZ. He had so many different ways to pick up them. He would sometimes just pick them up off the street and was like, you need a job? Get in the car, let's go. Yeah, kind of thing. Like, just, especially during that time period, it was easy. Just, you'd be like, hey, boy, you want to go? It was common.
Hitchhikers were common, too.
Oh, yeah, hitchhiking was fun. Yeah. It wasn't scary at all. Yeah.
It was great. Was like... He and, obviously there's a lot of people who ruined hitchhiking, and, the whole entire idea of it now is so, like, why the fuck would you do that?
Oh, when I see people hitchhiking, I'm like, well, also then you have the Elaine something, the hitchhiker killer, where she then also became another big fear because it was scary to hitchhike because you don't know who's driving you, but then it became scary because you don't know who you're picking up.
Yeah, the whole thing is like, you see a hitchhiker, like, that's an axe murderer.
Yeah. So we live in Utah, and we live in kind of like a small suburban area. I saw someone hitchhiking over like, kind of by like the not like... Anyways, in an area that I was like, why are you hitchhiking? Yeah. There's bus systems. Like, I literally was like...
It's a little shady.
And also, too, I was like, is this still a thing people legitimately do? Like, I could see being, like, desperate, but, like, someone's probably going to murder you, so you're hoping someone picks you up. But even then, most people just drive by, because who's going to pick up a hitchhiker?
Not in 2020.
Not in 2020. Oh, sorry. I mean, hopefully not. But... Because even in Canada, they had that. They had, like, a string of murders. They were called, like, there was, like, this big, long road in Alaska. This is a side story, sorry. But Alaska not Alaska, but in Canada, where there's literally billboards that say, women, do not hitchhike on this road. No. Because there was, like, a theory that there was a serial killer. Because women kept disappearing only when they were on this road. Wow. And, like, if your car got stopped, they said, lock your doors. and flags hopefully someone good, because you don't know in that road, because it's so wide and expanse that like it's so easy to just do it, because there's like even if they had, unless they had like 10 cop cars on that road all the time, there's no way they could monitor it.
Right.
But anyways, back to good old John Wayne Gacy. Like, I'm trying to think of like all of his killings, but yeah, his third victim, or I think that was his fourth victim. Wow, there's so many. Oh well, because some of them are not identified, so they number them based off, I think, of like decaying and like being able to like solve it that way. So some of them have names, but then like some of them are number 5 and some of them are like 28.
Well, and what the crazy part is, and I guess I can kind of get into the investigation side of things, is there was all these victims, but his last reported victim is actually the first one that his family, I don't know if it's the first one, but it's the first one that really got brought to the local investigators' attention. The family reported him missing, and I have his name right here. And to be honest with you, I believe that if his family didn't pursue this, John Wayne Gacy would have never been caught. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I lost my page. Let me go and find it again. He was a 15-year-old by the name of Robert Priest. He... Basically, how the story goes is he left his current job that he was at, like he was off for his shift, and he was meeting up with a gentleman about a construction job. Mm-hmm. And people knew that that's what he was going to go do, and that was the last he was ever heard.
Because it was also his mom's birthday, and he was like a really good son, and his mom, like, he would not miss my birthday for a job. Like, he wanted the job, but he would not miss his mom's birthday.
Right. So, I guess I can kind of get into the investigation's actually kind of crazy, and I think there's a lot to learn from it on how investigations need to be handled, because I feel like there was a lot of warning signs very early that they didn't.
Yeah. And I was watching a video today that was like talking about like the lead investigators and like people on the force, and like these guys did not realize what they were getting into when they were investigating Gacy.
Absolutely not.
So that's where like it's like crazy. Also, another thing before we get into the investigation to bring up, and this is why it's so wild too, and it's also like a good, and it's sad even today that this happens a lot, like, especially when men report, because Gacy at like the later times were starting to actually let people go. Yeah. So like I think there was 2 he let go. One went to the cops and actually was on the stand and had to explain every
Michael Rossi. Yeah.
Like he had to go on the stand and explain what happened to him, to the point that he threw up because it was so much for him.
Michael may honestly be the main proponent in Gacy going down. And,
fully, yeah.
And it gives me the chills thinking about him, because the mental struggle that poor kid at the time would have gone through to have to do all this, to be someone who got assaulted by him, and then still have to go and see him and go to trial and
explain what happened to him, because he was in the hospital for I think 6 weeks,
something along those lines.
It was at least 3 weeks at the most. He was there, or no, I think it was only 6 days, but still 6 days from just what John Wayne Gacy did to him alone. And it's just so like it just baffles me that there's nothing. Like no one investigated his, because it's like at that time also, like, I think because Gacy also was playing it off as like that guy was a prostitute. Yeah. And I think that's also how he was able to let some guys go, because there's also a couple victims where one where we have to shout out a dog because he saved the day. One, he had an employee there who he didn't know but was a professional wrestler. He was doing the handcuff trick on, and when his hands were behind his back, he didn't actually do it all the way. He only did it a little bit because he was like, this doesn't seem right. Right. And so when he was like, okay, what's the trick? And Gacy was like, you have to have the keys, and attacked him. Obviously, he had his hands and was able to like kind of fight it off, but his husky, like, kind of the kid's husky. So this kid had a husky, followed him kind of to Gacy's house, and literally like got into the house and was like biting Gacy.
Yeah.
And literally, you know how it ends was Gacy's like, haha, I'm just joshing ya, dude. Like, I'm just kidding. I'll take you home. He gets in his car with Gacy after just being almost attacked. And it was played off as just
good old like, boys being boys.
And that was it. He just went home. And he did that with a couple other people where he would like even like assault them and then just take them home. And it's like not like what do you even do? And especially that wrestler never thought about contacting anybody because he was like, maybe he's just a weird dude. He literally was just like weird guy.
Yeah. What a strange one.
But also shout out that husky. I couldn't find his name online. It was really sad. But the husky came to rescue, and that's where I'm like,
doggos
for life.
Doggos for life.
But yeah, so then with that, kind of like, it just kind of shows what kind of power he had, where he could even still get away with it.
Oh yeah.
And like, it waffles me.
Right.
But then he messed with the wrong last victim and their family. So that's when the investigation starts happening. So,
yeah, when Priest went missing, his family obviously was they pursued it. Where I don't know if the other families didn't or they did and there just wasn't as much of an evidence to build a case against Gacy. Yeah. But they knew where their son was and where he was going.
Well, I think another issue was, too, because I watched an interview with the mom. Because the kid said, hey, Mom... And because they were at a store together. And he left, he was like, hey, Mom, this guy wants to talk about construction job. I'm going to go with him and talk about it and maybe get this job so I can start making money.
Yeah.
His mom's like, okay. And then went home, assuming that maybe the gentleman who's offering him the job will take him home. Didn't come home. But I think a lot of where it kind of differentiates is she knew it was a construction job. I don't think a lot of the other families knew that they were offered a construction job. Yeah. And so she was able to hunt down all the people
who and what and why.
And then Gacy, with all those prior complaints, kind of was the main, let's look at him first.
Right. So, and that's exactly what happened. Gacy, the local police force and investigators put Gacy obviously as one of the prime suspects, which led to an initial search warrant because they were like, well, is Robert there? Like, is he still around? What is going on with it? So they did a search warrant on his house, and they found a lot of interesting things that would, like, today raise a lot of red flags. Some of it could be played off that they mentioned, like they found dildos and porn, and, you know, there was like some drugs, but they're not really like
he was really big into poppers, but poppers really weren't like a drug to look for. Another weird thing they found were like homosexuality books, and then there's the worst book was the one that I feel like should have just been the indicator. Was, I don't remember what it was called, but it was something like How Men Be with Boys.
It was like a pedophilia book.
Was like kind of a pedophilia book, but like not it wasn't enough,
it was weird.
It wasn't weird enough that you're like, interesting.
But they didn't have enough to really pin anything on Gacy. There were clothes, and they did find underwear that was way too small for Gacy to be in his house. But that still isn't enough information that they felt they could pin it. But it was enough that they put a surveillance team on him all the time.
24/7 surveillance, because what was it, December 12th that he went in the first day and they had a search warrant? He came back because they came and knocked on his door, was like, hey, you cool with doing investigations? And he was like, the thing that's like crazy about it is that he's like, actually, I'm dealing with the death in the family, and they're like, we don't care, you need to answer some questions. And he's like, wow, you guys don't even care that I'm dealing with like a death in my family, even though I took away 33 other family members. But that was like kind of like his thing, is like they then like investigated his house, but they like the way he was just so cocky and was like, I don't know that boy.
Well, he had such a weird like almost relationship with these surveillance teams. Like, he would invite them in for food, he would go out to eat with them, they would have these conversations. They even recounted him like being open about gay sex, and like I don't know if he made advances towards them or different things like that, but it was a weird dynamic. But
Yeah.
they noticed that it was starting to visibly shake him. Like he was starting to have...
He was starting to sweat.
He stopped like grooming. He stopped being kempt. Like, so it was working. And the surveillance team lasted a long time. But in steps Michael Rossi.
Oh, yeah.
During these surveillances and this investigation, Michael contacts the investigators basically to inform them of another victim, Gregory Godzix, his disappearance, and Charlie Hatula. I apologize if I'm butchering the names. I'm just not good with name. Both of them are missing. I believe that it was either Godzix or Charlie was washed up in the river. They did find his body.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was one thing Gacy was doing, was putting him in the...
Well, because he ran out of space in his crawl space.
Yeah.
And he had to literally... And he was using lime away to keep the smell away, which was baffling to me that it barely worked. Right.
But what this connected was both of those victims were... They worked with PDM, which was Gacy's construction company. Oh, yeah, sorry. It was Charles who was found. Charles Hatula was found drowned in the Illinois River earlier that year. So it just starting to build the case and build the case bigger.
They're starting to find all the little pieces that Gacy was able to hide.
Right.
And didn't he even say when he was like ate with them once? What was it that he said? What was it?
Oh, I'll leave that for later. Because
that's
that right there not only is one of the craziest things I've ever heard in investigation, but it also pisses me off.
It pisses me off. It's so angry.
Yeah, you guys will hear that later and you'll go, what the fuck? So the investigators conducted a formal interview with Michael, and he actually did a polygraph test. Mm-hmm. And what they did is they took the county that he lived in, and it was really weird how they did it, but they set up grids and where... Like, they asked Michael where so-and-so's body, like, where Robert's body was buried or something like that. And they started asking him, well, was it grid 4? And the polygraph caught visible heart palpitations going up. And then Michael refused to answer any more questions or different things like that. And I don't know if Michael was involved in... helping Gacy is the thing that...
That's like the crazy theory that people talk about a lot is, especially with his victim that got away, that had to go on stands and threw up.
Yeah.
He thought he saw another person in his room. So there's a theory that there was either one or a couple other people that were in cahoots with Gacy. Like, especially because if you think about like how he was in Springville with... What's the group called? Joyce. How they had like these sex parties essentially. So not like sex parties, but they would have these pornographic
wife swapping, prostitutes, the whole nine, drugs.
Whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
It kind of would make sense that if he did have a partner, how easy it's hidden because of how he kind of is able to I think he's able to like talk to certain people and be able to blow off when people aren't interested. And I think he could have easily found like people that wanted to maybe even pay Gacy to like, hey, catch anyone this week?
Yeah.
Can I come over and help you out maybe?
Right.
Like, never proven, but wouldn't be surprised.
Right. After the polygraph test, now this whole entire situation is taking place in December of 1978.
That's a good thing to mention too, as to why when they went into his house the first time, because like people started noticing a smell in his house that he blamed a dog. But in the winter, obviously, bodies don't decompose as fast, and you can air out your house easier.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason why the first time they looked into his house, they didn't find anything because they weren't really looking. Like, they might have noticed a smell, but not enough until the second time.
The second time because he had the heaters on.
Dumbass.
There was an interesting investigation where they went and did a test on his Oldsmobile, which was his car that he used normally, and they did find microfibers that could have been human hair.
Yeah.
But because of it being the 70s, they didn't have the right
test.
But they did a German Shepherd dog test, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
And what it was is, I don't know if they had Robert Priest's scent in some way, but
they got like a shirt from his mom or something.
And what they did was they put it around the dogs around the Oldsmobile, and they actually, the dogs picked up the scent and got into the front seat, and they laid down. And I guess through the training that those dogs did is that they laid down somewhere, that means that there was the dead body of that person in that area. So the dogs may have proved that Priest was in that car dead.
Died in the car.
But that still wasn't enough to
fully prosecute him.
Right.
But didn't that give him the second warrant?
Yes, that led to the second warrant. Let me get my information. And it is worth mentioning that during this, after the Oldsmobile thing, Gacy did file a civil suit.
Because he was feeling harassed. He was
feeling harassed. It was for $750,000, which is an outrageous amount of money during this time.
Outrageous.
So come December 19th is when the second search warrant was finalized and they were able to go in his house. One of the investigators was using a weird tactic of he was conversing with Gacy in like a pretty polite manner. The other one sneaked away to try and look around the house, but he ended up just going to the bathroom and he started taking a pee. And because Gacy had turned up the heat in his house, the guy smelled what he was for sure is rotting corpses.
Yeah, especially being a detective, like, you know what a dead body smells like.
Right.
And he was like, that smells like decay. And then it was like, boom, instant.
Right. After that interview, on the same day, I believe, or the day after, they interviewed Michael Rossi.
Yeah.
And they straight up asked him where Gacy could have put these bodies of all these victims. And it is quoted that Michael said in the crawl space, he could have put them in the crawl space.
Yes. Well, and then that's when they looked in the crawl space. Because also, too, when they were talking to neighbors, Gacy would hire these young boys to dig out his crawl space, murder them, put them back in the crawl space. But he actually had multiple kids dig more into the crawl space so he can hide more bodies.
Right.
And that's when, like, because, like, these poor kids, the ones, like, didn't even get murdered and put back in there, would leave and be like, man, his house smells like shit.
Yeah.
But they don't know, because, like, I mean, if I smelled a dead body, I probably wouldn't even, unless I knew it was, I probably wouldn't know what that scent really was, except maybe decay. I could have thought it was an animal. You know, like, maybe they thought, like, he had a dead mouse.
Right.
Like, it could have been that stinky.
So what gets weird is this final December 20th, the same day that Michael announced the
crawl space.
The crawl space. Gacy later that evening drives over to his lawyer's office because they had a scheduled meeting in regards to his civil suit. And upon arrival, even his lawyer said that something was wrong. Yeah. Gacy was acting weird. He asked for a drink, like a beer, or like
he's like, I need something.
Vodka, whiskey, or whatever. And he was asked, they were asking questions or whatever, but Gacy picked up a book, or a copy, of the local newspaper that was sitting on, I believe, his lawyer's desk, and he pointed to the front page of the article that was talking about the disappearance of Robert Priest, and he quoted saying to his lawyer, "This boy is dead. He's in a river." And that right there was pretty much the beginning of the end of that. Was like a confession. Basically.
Especially when you say it to your lawyer. But another thing to bring up too is a fun, not like a fun little thing, but when they picked up Gacy to do more questioning, and he basically was like, "Oh, my heart, I need the hospital." They took him to the hospital while they're trying to do his thing, and the detective that was supposed to like check up on him, make sure he's still there, like basically it correlated like this, like Gacy was coming out and this cop would just got off like the phone with the person there and was like, "We just found bones," and literally hangs up, looks at Gacy's like, "You're under arrest for the murder of I think what was Priest. What's his first name? Robert Priest." And then from there, that's how they were able to get him easier too.
One thing that scared me to death was when, after he confessed this to his lawyer, he went on a rambling spree of confessions. I think this just really went to a boiling point of like he just couldn't handle it anymore, or because he later on in the trial, which we'll talk about, he was very arrogant, thinking he was going to get off.
Yeah.
But he was quoted. He was informing his lawyer and Stevens and different people who were in the situation of what's going on. But this is a direct quote from him.
Oh.
He had been the judge, jury, and executioner of many, many people. That's a quote from John Wayne Gacy when he's confessing to his murders.
Yeah, well, because I have here somewhere where he was talking about it, where he was like kind of like how he viewed his persona as a clown, almost kind of like a veil, because it's like clowns are like can't be murderers, or like clowns have no remorse.
Yeah. And
that they're good like he's a good citizen, and he was taking out the deviants.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to get into. Is Gacy dismissed his victims as male prostitutes, hustlers, liars, and to what he gave them was the rope trick. So the strangulation and adding to the occasional, he was just saying awful things. There was dead kids on the ground. There was all this type of stuff. Like it got to the point where I think that he had to start telling people. And this was his first confessions. And, obviously they informed the police of what was going on, and that he said that they were in the crawl space. They went, and I believe when the officers showed up, he was quoted saying he wanted to clear the air, which I don't know in his mind if he thought like, oh, he's going to clear the air, meaning like, oh yeah, I killed all these shitty people.
Yeah, they like, let me tell you how I cleared the air, how I did the world a service by these 15-year-olds who know absolutely nothing.
Which obviously is false when we talk about Robert Priest, because his family said that he was pretty much a great kid.
They were all, I mean, like, I haven't, like, looked into the character of each of his victims, obviously, but, like, all of them were good people.
Right.
I mean, none of them were murderers or rapists, so, I mean, that's instantly much better than what Gacy was doing.
So, to finish out the investigation, everything, in the early morning hours of December 22nd, in the presence of his lawyers, Gacy provided a formal statement in which he confessed to murdering approximately 30 young males, all of whom he claimed had entered his house willingly.
Yeah. But, well, to expand on that a little bit more, because initially when they were they were piecing the bodies together at this point.
Right.
As when they caught him and started, like, his, when you go to the judge and be like, this is what we're prosecuting him for. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
What we're convicting him for is this. They initially only had 7, and he initially was like, yeah, I did the 7. Kind of was like, no, I don't mean there's 7. Yeah, for sure, 7.
Yeah.
And then they kept digging and digging, and obviously the crawl space kept getting deeper and deeper. Then by the end, he was like, yeah, 33.
Right.
But at the end of even the trial, they were like, it's officially 33, because they were still finding bodies even when he got sentenced.
Right.
Because that goes into, like, the trial a little bit more. And so let me get my notes, because I actually took some good notes. So the trial started February 6, 1980. So, and he was arrested December 22nd, 1978. And that's when they charged him initially with just the 7. Obviously, he kept finding more bodies up until 33, until, like, later, or 30 until it was, like, exactly 33. So killed 33. 4 was found in the river. Because that day he admitted to 7.
Right.
And then that's when they ordered the psych eval and started the trial. Obviously, with only knowing the 7, they didn't realize how monumental it was. And the fact that they only went to go find this one kid and found 33 kids, I don't know how they, like, I want to even, like, see, like, an interview nowadays of, like, how this has impacted the investigators and people like that, because,
I'm sure
like,
so.
Because, like, even then they were like, we were looking for one kid, and we found so many people.
I'm sure, like, I can't even fathom those investigators, like, because like you said, they had no idea what they were getting into. They thought maybe this guy, like, kidnapped Robert or, did something, and then everything started compiling, and I think it clicked in their heads, like, oh my god, like, this might be
big.
Like, even, I bet, I'm not speaking from anything that I read, but, what if that investigator smelled that rotting corpse and was like, oh my God, maybe Robert's down there.
I think that's what he probably assumed.
And not even thinking the fact that it's not just Robert down there. There's a fucking pile of them. You know?
Well, because especially when they started going, then, like, once they, found a bone, they started looking at every little thing. And I think it was I don't know exactly his numbering now, but the third one on the list of on the Chicago Tribune, I should look up his name, because he's the one that graduated and got captured by the last check and was able to, like, get called. Because he just graduated, they actually found his class ring in Gacy's house. And that's how they were able to identify him as it was John Butkovsky?
Well, I think, too, that I can't remember if this is correct or not, so... And if anyone watching this, if you guys want to fact check us, please do, because that will help us.
At the end, I'll give you resources so we can start a discussion, and you can, like, let us know if we're way off, or we've done tons of research. We spent hours on this, but I just to preface this, I won't call out the podcast that messed up, but doing research this morning into his childhood, this podcast that's a huge crime podcast was wrong on his age of when he left to go to Vegas. They said that he was 20. He wasn't 20. He was 17.
Right. So even big, huge organization podcasts
these people
mess up.
Make so much money doing podcasts. Like, they're so big. You literally, I don't want to call them out because it's not a big deal. It's really not. It's just so hard to know exactly what happened unless you ask Gacy. And even then, Gacy's not going to tell you what happened because he wants... He
wants it to look as best for him as possible. Yeah,
because he did an interview 2 years before, and when he's talking about it, he's, like, still kind of like, I mean, like, I guess I did that, but... Like, it wasn't as bad as it makes a shame. But, like, he was... Even to the end, he was trying to clear his name. Right. Because, I mean, he's just a people's man. But, so in the trial, he had given 3 confessions and told the cops where to find his body, kind of like that's what a lot of killers do, is once they get caught, to like smooth over their sentencing, hopefully, is to like help the detectives. And sometimes they'll make plea deals, like, if you tell me where every single body is, or you tell me the name of every person, we won't give you the death penalty, we'll let you live in life. Right. But for this exact moment, though, because of Gacy confessing to this 7 of them, they really wanted to, like, hammer down, because there's a difference. And also, too, in Illinois, I don't know if it still is, we'll do another episode only on the death penalty eventually, but in the state of Illinois at this time had the death penalty, and so a capital offense, which is just murder, you don't get the death penalty. Right. So even if you murdered 7 people, well, I don't know, there's like a certain number, like if you murdered 2, you don't, it's a capital offense, or is it a capital offense if it's more? Anyways, the trial, they were really trying to hammer down getting him the death penalty. Right. No one wanted him to live another day. No. Which we can go into. I have a lot of opinions on the death penalty, which Gacy deserved 100%.
Absolutely.
That's all I'll say about that. But as a whole, it doesn't make sense. But so his defense first tried to. When they started the trial, they ordered psych evals instantly because that takes so much longer. Right. So they wanted that before the trials truly started, because it didn't start until basically a year after he was captured, because you have so much that goes into a trial. But crazy enough, this trial only lasted less than a month. It was a month from February 6th to March 12th is when it ended. So
which is crazy, because normally trials
take so long,
drag on,
and especially too, like, how long they deliberated. It's crazy, especially something like as powerful as the death penalty. The fact that these people were so disgusted that it only took so little time is crazy. But anyway, so they did a cross-examination trying to blame schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder. He wasn't in a great state of mind. They played a lot on his childhood, and that's why his childhood's really important to who he is, because they were also trying to say that the abuse of his dad caused him to be this way. Literally, I mean, is it the defense when you're protecting, like fighting for the murderer.
Yeah.
So his defense team was like really, I mean, you have to when
they're legally bound.
They're legally bound to try to find any single way possible. I mean, like Rob Kardashian protecting OJ, you know what I mean? Like it's your job. You have to do it. But so they were trying those 3 things. Obviously, schizophrenia wasn't very known at the time of like how it works, but enough was known that it was like not schizophrenia. And then a debunking fun fact about like multiple personality disorders is when you have multiple personalities, even if you only had 2, like you had an alternate self and yourself, you don't remember what happens when you're in your alternate state. And that's where they were able to say, no, you don't have that because you're able to remember every single crime and how you did it.
He recalled all of it.
He was able to recall. If he basically was like, I don't recall anything, and was able to be like, deny, which he confessed. If he was really thinking it through, he shouldn't have confessed if he was trying to go for that murder. But, right. I mean, no one knows about that really well, so, like, obviously. But, so then the trial, they had 60 witnesses. 6 of them were psychologists, basically saying that, what was it that... there was like a good quote like of what they said, but essentially what they said that they found Gacy to be mentally or they were trying to say that he was mentally prepared, and further testified that he is consequently unable to understand the nature of his actions and therefore should not be held or should be had, because they were trying to then change it to sending him to a mental asylum, right, to the point where all 6 of them were like, this man was cohesive. How was it? Coherent. Yeah. He was so coherent that he knew exactly what he was doing. Oh, yeah. There's no way this man is any kind of mentally disabled.
No, he's 100%.
He has no mental disability. This man knew what he was doing. And that's what, like, is crazy is that, like, even all psychologists were like, this man is the most coherent man I've ever talked to. He knows what he did wrong.
Well, and that harkens back to what I talked about is when he was in his adult life. Like, he fucking was successful. How can we say that he was...
How could, not that you can't, because, I mean, schizophrenia, if you've ever watched Beautiful Minds, that scientist was able to live with it. But even that man, his son wasn't and had been in the hospital most of all his life. Yeah. So, just because you have a mental disability does not mean you can't be successful. But with what they were trying to fight for to get him off wasn't something you can really have fully when you are so successful. Right. But it's just a ploy to try to get out of it. Of course, like any kind of mental health issue, you can still be the most successful person in the world. But in Gacy's case, it was a definite not. And
no,
also too,
I think they were just trying to push that. Yeah, and also
too, especially too, because I feel like if he had any of those 2, schizophrenia or multiple personalities, it would have been noticeable in the community and someone would have mentioned it. Right. But no one did. No. Obviously. No. So.
The only thing that I could think of that goes into that was his clown personality.
His clown personality, but the thing is, most of the time when he was a clown, he was still, like, joshing and drinking with the boys.
Well, and even the clown thing, like, it doesn't seem like it was... The clown thing was only prevalent in this because he would use that as like, I'm a clown, I know these magic tricks. Like, the clown stuff really doesn't have anything to do with John Wayne Gacy, the villain, besides the fact that it was just a part of his life.
It was a part of his life, and it kind of made him a staple. Yeah. Especially because, like, later and when he's incarcerated, I'll talk about that. It's pretty interesting. But, so, long story short, trial was really short. The poor kid that got away, luckily he was able to get away and live his best life, but he literally threw up on the sands because he couldn't handle it. And I think they deliberated, like, what was it? I think 5 hours?
Which is... insane.
Because most of the time when you're deliberating, especially taking his life,
it would go for...
No, wait. Even better. They deliberated for 2 hours. Right. So, like, especially, like, in a crime like this, it mostly takes, like, about 24 hours, 48 hours, because basically you're stuck in that deliberation room until you figure it out. Because you don't want any, like, opinions, because you're a jury. You have to be non-biased. 2 hours. It took them to say, yeah, let's kill this fucker.
Well, and I kind of think, too, that it was because of how impactful, like, that's something that I didn't do any research on. I don't know if you did either, but like, there was pictures of them, like, hundreds of people around Gacy's house, like, wondering if their kid was in there. Like, this was making papers. This was making headline news. I think it was so impactful.
I was reading a little about it but even to this day, Chicago still talks about it like it happened yesterday. It was so harmful on this community that this monster took so many lives of these young men and destroyed their mental health for the ones that got away. That, like, to this day, like, I mean, I'll bring it up to my dad and he's like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh. He's like, because, like, I mean, my dad was, I think, because he was born in 1968. So he was
fairly young.
12 or 13. So basically the age of when he would have been the victim if he lived in Chicago, kind of thing. Especially because, like, anyways. But, yeah, so it only took them 2 hours to decide that he was sentenced to death. And I don't remember exactly what county it was. But, so then, the thing that, like, baffles me is then he lived for 14 more years before he got executed.
94, right?
94. And we'll get into more like our opinions, more interesting things, but just so that way we can wrap up John Wayne's story as more of like, so on May 10th, 1994, his last meal at 12:58 a.m., he got 12, I don't know why it's specifically numbered, but 12 deep fried shrimp, a bucket of KFC chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries.
I want to know if the 12 is symbolic to anything.
I wonder. Or if it was just like, or maybe it's like, you just a dozen, it's just easy. Yeah. So like you just order a dozen. But his famous last words, so like, obviously I think he got euthanized, wasn't it?
I'm actually not sure.
Oh, lethal injection.
Yeah.
May 10th is when he had his last meal. May 19th is when he,
when they
lethal him. Yeah, and even up until his last breath, he was still proclaiming innocence. But when they say any last words before we inject you, he literally said, "Kiss my ass." What a asshole.
That's crazy.
To the point where even on death row for the murder of 33 kids, he was still like, fuck you guys, I'm innocent, kiss my ass.
What he did. I think that goes back to what I said, though. I think in his head, maybe he did have, like, I don't know. That's the crazy thing about this, right? Because we hear all the information that we have about the victims and how things happened were from Gacy. Like, he had to be the one that told, like,
the story.
A lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
And, like, it's just crazy to me to think that, did he really in his mind think that what he was doing is okay because he maybe associated these kids with being
delinquents?
Well,
another thing is he would also target kids that were a lot like him as a kid.
Right.
And I think because he was so ingrained that he was this awful human being, that he kind of was like taking it out on people he thought were kind of similar to him in a sense. So I think it was easy to justify it because he was like, well, my dad told me I was a piece of shit and a gay boy my whole life. So are these whores, like calling them male prostitute hookers and liars.
Thieves.
And it's like, first of all, you withheld paychecks. You're a thief. Second of all, you went out and found some of these. No, I think there was only one that was a prostitute because he picked him up at a gay bar. That's when at the John Wayne Gacy movie, that was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. It baffled me. Don't watch the Gacy movie. Not because it's graphic, because it is not correct at all to what happened in the Gacy story. Also, it makes no sense because it basically starts off with like his wife being like just like disgusted with him, and like, oh, we totally forgot too that he had some of these men as roommates. Yeah, that was another crazy thing. That's not really as big because those one, I think he had two. I think one got away and one didn't. Yeah. But it's also really hard to tell like how it all happened because there's just so much information, and like to make like a good storyline on it is like a good 3 hours of exactly what happened. So there's no way like a good way to like go through each and every single one to do them justice. But also a good source of information, the Chicago Tribune literally updates on Gacy still. That's why I know it's still impacting because literally that's how I found a lot of good articles, is the Chicago Tribune is still like passionate about telling what happened. Is like they're like, this was so awful in our community. Like,
you know what has gotten to be a really good resource outside? This is not. I mean, it's prevalent to how I do my research. Mm-hmm. Wikipedia is better than it used to be.
Yeah, I think they're starting to fact check it a little bit more because you can still edit it. So unless some little asshole changed it, but
so what I was doing is I was using Wikipedia as like a give me the idea, and then I would like, for example, one of the murders or whatever, they would bring it up in the Wikipedia article, and then I would cross-examine it on like a site that's dedicated to it. Wikipedia, there was only like 2 things that were wrong based off of just a date and an age. Okay. Everything else Wikipedia had correct. Oh. So I don't know if they're just stepping their game up or what, but...
Well, and also too, this kind of goes into like more of like our interesting facts is like how like fanboys people are about these serial killers. Yeah. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's literally someone out there that's like correcting it and making sure it's correct, because they're such fanatics. And it's
serial killer culture really is very interesting.
It's interesting. I mean, there's an extent, and I think every person has their limit as to what's okay in the serial killer culture. Like there's this YouTuber who's basically like, unless you're only talking about them and it's like as they're sickos, and like I can't really gauge her dealings on it. I agree with her on the whole like romanticizing serial killers, but she's very much against like no merchandise, don't print out their faces anymore, let's try to like hide them like kind of like that thing. But then there's some people that are like
they romanticize
they romanticize, but not even like romanticize like, oh, I wish I was able, like a lot of like especially women, and like this is like a big thing with like the Columbine killers, is a lot of women what is it? The savior complex in women that's like, oh, if I would have known them when they were a teenager, I could have saved them and prevented this horrific event.
Right.
Especially with, I think, what was it? Is it Dylan the one that wasn't involved? Eric was the one that basically led him?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know a lot about Columbine.
I don't remember. But anyways, the one that really didn't even shoot a gun, everyone like, a lot of like, in the like weird parts of the internet, like women just flock and like, was like, I wish I could have saved him so he wouldn't have been involved and he could have like we could have had kids and then this, and it's like you're creating like a whole like dynamic that's like, that's, first of all, go save someone else right now that's going through that. There's people every day. But like that's to the point where it's I think that's too far.
Yeah.
But like I think owning like a t-shirt that had like a mugshot of like a killer, I don't think that's like okay, but I don't shun anybody for it.
No,
because it's like
I think
it's a little tacky, but
I think where I draw the line is where the money's going. Because if I'm buying, let's say I want to go buy a John Wayne Gacy mugshot or a Killer Clown t-shirt or something like that, if it's going to someone who's profiting off of John Wayne Gacy and all of his victims, that's not okay. But if it's an organization that is taking the money and trying to give back to the community or to the families or whatever it might be, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's very rare, and it's mostly like not the thing, but...
Right, and that's why I mostly won't.
Going off of serial killer culture, there's a documentary called Serial Killer Culture, and it's on Prime. If I find any cool movies. So Gacy's on Prime, Serial Killer Culture documentary's on Prime. Unfortunately, it was on Netflix, they took it down. But it basically starts off, it's a documentary about people who are obsessed with serial killers.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like too, where like you're watching it and you're like, I don't know if like this could be okay, but like some of them is like, there's like a duo that like it's like a band. They're a band and they make songs about serial killers. Yeah. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because you're making fun of the serial killers and putting them down.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even Sufjan Stevens has that John Wayne Gacy song, and that song is...
It's
rough. If you want to listen to, like, a song that just gives you chills and makes you visibly uncomfortable, listen to John Wayne Gacy by Sufjan Stevens.
It made me uncomfortable.
Don't listen to it out loud unless you want people to judge you for your music choice. But it's really interesting how he just does like a weird thing with that song, and it was very interesting. But with that thing, a guy, they never really said their names, but there was Also, the movie's by John Borowski. But, so this guy, he was, as a kid, he'd watch serial killers, or, like, watch movies, and kind of when, he was, like, I don't know where he lived exactly, but he was close enough to Illinois that he could, like, go there over, like, a weekend, and come home same day kind of thing. He kind of got into, like, memorabilia, horror memorabilia, and his justification of why he started to get into, serial killer memorabilia is because he was trying to make money to buy more horror movie posters. Is dead ass what he said.
I get that.
Because he, I don't know how he came across it, but he came across, because when John Wayne Gacy went to jail, they, like, kind of gave him an outlet to paint and to sell his paintings. And it was very sporadic, because who wants that, especially in that area? No one wants anything to do with Gacy. It's taboo. And even they had, like, a bonfire where they burned all of his paintings the day he died, because, like, people would just buy them just to burn them. Because
wasn't there some, though, selling for a fuck ton of money, and people, I think there's still some that exist, right?
Oh no, there's still some that exist, but there was 2 gentlemen that tried to buy the most of them,
right?
But there were still so many floating because of this guy right here. Okay, so this guy, he found his paintings. I don't know how he came across them, or if he just bought one, but he messaged, or, like, wrote a letter to Gacy, and, like, okay, that's what makes me sad about the death row thing, is John Wayne Gacy had his own letterhead.
Yeah.
When he would write letter to people, he had a letterhead. Fancy one. Like, what privilege do they deserve?
Side thing on this is, if you look up death row inmates, they don't live what you would want them to live.
He should not have deserved 14 years of a good life.
I watched a documentary, this was a while ago, I don't remember what it was, but it was on death row inmates. Does the prison that they were at that had the death row section, they showed it, like, they have TVs, they have all these things they can tinker with. John Wayne Gacy had paint and paintings, like,
yeah,
they have outlets to
keep from being bored,
and
essentially. In
my humble opinion, I think it should be more of, like, you get fed and you sit.
Sit, or they do manual labor to give back to the community.
Yeah, depending on how extreme of a case it is. I mean, usually it's fairly extreme to get on death row. I don't think that they should be living a better life than some who are out who are suffering, trying to be good people.
Yeah, like, especially people who are working minimum wage jobs and breaking their necks, trying to, like, make their next paycheck so they can pay rent.
Right.
And John Wayne Gacy was living 14 years better than I'm even living now. Excuse me? Right. But this guy, he messaged him, and he was like, hey, can I come visit? I kind of am really interested in your paintings. And John Wayne Gacy is obviously like, yeah.
Fuck yeah.
And then, obviously, the kid at the time was about 18, 19, or maybe he was, like, 20. He looked really young. And he talked about how he would sit across from John Wayne Gacy and, like, so he was buying his paintings, and at the time it was about $30 to $60, which, I mean, even now is, like, what, $120
or $200? Probably a little more than that, yeah.
Yeah, like, well, he was
like $200 to $800, I think, is what they
were selling at that point, but, like, now that would be like $2,000, $3,000 is what they were selling for. But even during this time period, he was still, like, making, like, $100, $200 a painting.
Good ass money
from these fucking random people around the world. Anyways, but this guy visited him, and he's like, I'd love to have some of your paintings, and I'd help you sell them. And he was like, okay. And then Gacy would mail them out, but the warden stopped it because he was like, this is a business venture. So even in jail, this motherfucker was a businessman.
Hustling.
He was hustling, which is crazy because he could not do anything with that money except buy soda and candy bars.
Yeah.
He did not deserve soda and candy bars.
No.
But anyway, so the warden stopped it basically because it was considered a business venture, which is just fucking crazy, this man. But what he could do, though, is this kid would come, like, once a month or once every once in a while, and Gacy can give him as a gift.
Yeah. And
then he can go and sell them. And that's what started this guy in particular into getting into serial killer memorabilia, because then he went to other people like Richard Ramirez and was like, hey, man, if you make me a couple drawings, I'll sell them and give you some money.
Yeah.
And Richard Ramirez was like, hell yeah.
For sure.
And I don't even remember who the killer was, but he literally has, like, Polaroids of him with Gacy. Baffling. But the funny thing is he would, he would like, Gacy loved when he visited him because he looked like a young boy, obviously.
Of
But he would fondle him jokingly and would try to pinch him. And he was like, there was one time where he tried to pinch his penis and was like, just playing.
Gacy did that to him?
Gacy did that to him.
Oh,
because when he would visit, he wasn't like in handcuffs because, you know.
Yeah. That's so haunting to me.
But the fact that he would go back after being like kind of fondled by John Wayne Gacy. Dude, and this guy had like a wife and kids, and everyone in his like life was like, this is fucking weird what you're doing. And he was like, but money, and it's kind of interesting. And so this guy literally helped him. And my favorite is that John Wayne Gacy gave him an autograph of him as Pogo the Clown. And it said, to my best friend, I think his name is Mark, from Gacy, your favorite clown. Literally, he has like, it's just like, oh. And he has it in his house. But like for him, he was saying he saw it as a novelty and basically grew it as a business. And he's like, don't get me wrong. If I died tomorrow and someone just set my house on fire and all this shit got lost, I could give a shit less. It's just kind of interesting. It's just a novelty. It's almost like collecting snow globes for this guy.
Yeah, it definitely. I see the appeal.
No, I definitely understand too. Well, it's like because the thing is, if it wasn't in this guy's house, I would go see it at a museum.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
That's where I feel like his makes I don't shun him. Like it's messed up because he was even saying like he's like, so what? I was giving John Wayne Gacy money. He could not spend all the money he got. So I think he, like, in the end probably gave it to his mom if he was still alive, or, like, maybe one of his kids. I don't really know.
Hopefully it went somewhere good.
Went somewhere good, because I don't know what you do. He probably had a will, so anything he made in prison went to whoever was in his will, which I would assume at that point, if his mom was dead, it would be his kids.
Right.
If he even give a shit. I don't know, because he never saw them.
No, he never talked about it that I could find.
He never really talked. He never mentioned the fact that he had kids, but he probably honestly just didn't want his kids known in the world. Yeah. Which, you know how, like, sons look a lot like their dads? I wonder, like, if his son looked like his dad.
I don't know. I'd hope that
not.
I just hope that his kids, wherever they are, have been able to live a normal life without
being known as Gacy's kids.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, too, because his first wife just got the fuck out of Springfield. So they honestly, especially during that time, and especially since he had a daughter and a son, I mean, that last name Gacy isn't as popular, but I don't know what his son, I know if I looked it up, I can find the kids' names. I just didn't, there's no reason to look up the serial killer's kids, because that is not.
It just draws attention.
It just draws attention to them, and they don't deserve that attention, because that's the sin of the father, not sin of the child.
Yes.
In a sense. I don't believe in religion, but I like that because it's not the kid's fault. Like, Rose Bundy.
Yeah.
She changed her name. No one knows who she is.
Right.
They'll never know.
Yeah.
Unless she came out. And I would assume the only... and, like, most of the time... and that's why, too, there's, like, this investigation show that kind of pisses me off. And it's, like... what is it even called? But it's basically, like, this woman she's the daughter of the Craigslist killer.
Yeah.
And it's about bringing in killers' family members to apologize to the victim's family. And I don't know about you... but if I had that situation happen to me and John Wayne Gacy's sister was like, can I apologize to you? I'd be like, I don't fucking know you. You obviously didn't know your brother. There's no reason for us to talk, because it's also your brother, not you. So
it just feels like a ploy to make money.
It really is. That's what it 100% is. And that's why, too, if someone, like, asked me if they could apologize for their family member, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
You're not the person that needs to apologize, because that's not on you.
No, you don't
know.
Feel obligated either.
Yeah, like, I don't, like, I don't... So that's why, like, the guilt part kind of confuses me sometimes, because I'm like, why should you feel guilty because, like...
someone else did something awful?
Yeah, like, because I know, well, that is where it becomes more of, like, they don't feel like a victim, but they feel like they should have known better, because I get that, because, Ted Bundy's first girlfriend wrote a book of, like, how she kind of wished she knew basically what the Crazily Wicked, whatever, the Zac Efron movie, based off of, I don't remember names really well, no. But kind of like how she wrote a book of, like, how she's like, I wish I was able to see the signs, but, like, when someone's that sick and twisted and is able to live in society unhidden for so long, it makes sense that even family members wouldn't know. Because if I started seeing something in a friend, I would either distance myself to the point where I won't know, because I don't want to be a victim, or I don't want to, die, or almost like, ignorance is bliss in a way.
Yeah.
But unless I saw someone murdered, then I'll be like, okay, hey,
right.
cops, it's this guy. We've been friends since elementary school. Oh, that's my best friend. Get her. Kind of thing. But that was one of the interesting things about serial killer culture, which I think we can do a whole podcast on.
Serial killer culture is interesting.
Very interesting.
So one thing that we wanted to do, and I think that we can structure this a little different next time to fit this in, so it's not near the end. But we wanted to bring a different element to a crime podcast, being non-mainstream facts that are just interesting about the situation.
Yeah.
And yours was this guy who was kind of the memorabilia
guy that was able to help distribute all of his paintings.
Yeah.
Also, fun fact about his paintings, this is how much of a businessman he is. He would get 10 canvases, line them up, start with red, paint all the red. Start with blue, go with the blue.
He knew. And that just goes to how fucking brilliant Gacy really was.
Too smart for his own good.
And scary brilliant is what I mean.
Scary man.
Because he got, keep in mind, he got away with all of this shit with only having to serve 18 months in prison before his final capture.
Yeah.
He was doing evil things for years.
Yeah, and honestly, if he didn't have his heater on, he probably would have gotten away a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact that I kind of learned is that they were very suspicious of him killing himself. They thought because before he went to his lawyers, he was starting to visit close friends and neighbors and was basically saying I gotta go, I'm gonna be leaving soon. Then he went to his lawyers and was then captured. But they had a lot of people were suspicious of him planning on killing himself because he didn't want to get captured.
Right.
I don't think he was remorseful by any means. I think it was more he just didn't want to be captured and then be tarnished in his reputation.
Right. I had a couple interesting non-mainstream facts, which we pretty much covered most of them.
Yeah.
The fact that Gacy had a successful business, which was raking in annual revenue of $200,000 in that time period, which now would be probably 7 figures. Or something like that. Then also, one of them was the fact that they tried to say he had schizophrenia, which Holly covered, and the jury was like, yeah, psych, it doesn't matter, he's going to jail.
Yeah.
The one thing, though, the one interesting fact that I kept from saying earlier, which I guess I could have just said, that pissed me off, is during the surveillance time period where these detectives and investigators were following him, Gacy invited them into a restaurant for a meal, right? And this was in the early hours of December 18th, so right in that time period.
Right before he was
Yeah, there was, just 4 days later he confessed. He invited them to a restaurant over breakfast where he talked of his business, his marriages, and his activities as a registered clown. And at one point during the conversation, Gacy remarked, and this is a direct quote, clowns can get away with murder.
That would, if someone, if I was investigating someone and they taunted me like that.
Oh, I'd put that guy through a fucking wall.
I think, we don't have to get into politics, but that's the case where police brutality should have been involved, because he should have been. If I was investigating someone, or even if I was talking to someone and they said something they did something, if they did something morally wrong and I was that's kind of fucked up, and they were like, what are you talking about, I can do whatever I want, or kind of that cocky attitude, I'd want to deck them the fuck out.
No, for sure.
Especially clowns can get away with murder and they're trying to find a missing boy that they're pretty sure was murdered.
Right.
He's an infuriating man because the fact that he's so smart and had so much money and had all the resources, and he could have just been a good person.
I think every serial killer is way smarter. I can't think of one off the top of my head that was dumb, because it's so.
The hitchhiker girl, the Elaine something.
Yeah.
She was actually.
Little.
No. She was cuckoo in the head, because she was, and we'll get into her later, but she was the only one that I could think of that was kind of stupid.
Right.
But hers was also, if you look at like her murders, they were more chaotic. Not
Right.
really. They weren't planned like this. Dahmer's or Bundy's or like
Right.
Richard Ramirez,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm trying to think of like, I'm combining so many names that I'm like, fuck, I can't think.
So how about for a closing? Because I think we've shared most of our opinions on everything throughout talking about it.
We just want to thank you guys for sitting for this first episode. We know it's not the most structured true crime one. We're starting to work on it, First episode, that's why it's called the pilot episode.
I mean, I try to stay pretty humble, but I think we did a very good job for our first episode trying to do something with a structured backbone and following point. So I think we did a great job.
Yeah, but future-wise, we kind of want to get more into a simpler personality and kind of going more over like the interesting things like how this gentleman sells his paintings. Like, we want to get more into like those kind of things because those are the most fascinating because no one really talks about those.
No.
Like, no one really talks about the fact that John Wayne Gacy made so much money in prison by selling his artwork, and people just allowed him to do it because he has like rights still as a human being, which is disgusting that a man who kills 33 young boys is still deserving of rights.
Yeah. At what point do we draw the line?
Yeah. But anyways,
so let's talk what's next, because
what's next?
Both of us kind of left it like we have ideas of topics that we want to cover going into the future. We're planning as of right now to do every 2 weeks. That gives us ample time to research and not be burnt out and recover from this episode and be able to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, taking in this much crazy information also could be harmful to us.
It's super dark. Like watching the documentaries, even watching the man talk was just like, I literally these last 3 days have felt very angry. Just in general, because it's like you just realize how fucked up the world is in a sense. But we're gonna keep about 2 weeks. We'll do some fun ones where it's not like we're not gonna focus on serial killers. It's true crime.
Yeah, it's everything.
It's everything.
Cover a lot of things.
And so we'll be covering tons of things, and that brings me into my exciting project that I've been working on for you guys. So by the next episode, we're going to have a full working website. We'll have where our researchers are coming from. I'll be linking like cool YouTube videos if you guys are interested. Just sources, pictures, things like that. So we'll have like an official website kind of to do that. And then also too, we have an email address that you can even email now. So if you have any suggestions, concerns, you just want to talk.
Fact checks.
I'll be more monitoring this, but it'll be our email address, which is going to be truecrimedrunks@gmail.com. So, and then our website's going to be truecrimedrunks.com, which isn't up and running yet. We'll have it next episode.
Yes.
When we talk about the 11-year-old serial killer, Mary Bell.
This is an interesting one for me because I don't even know who she was until you brought it to my attention. I've never heard her. I don't know any media about it. So it's exciting for me.
It's really interesting.
Going in completely blind.
The 11-year-old serial killer. So we're gonna keep it to like mainstream, non-mainstream, some conspiracy. We're gonna maybe even get to some gangsters. Yeah. But look forward to next week when we do Mary Bell.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now.
Which is... I don't know time. I don't know dates.
You did the
oh, my glasses were falling. So that'll be on the July 4th. Can we make that work?
We should be able to make that work.
I don't like... Anyways, but we can figure it out. We'll let you know once the website's up and running. You can also follow me on Instagram. I have it's more of like a book Instagram and horror movie related, so I'm not talking a ton just because we're not sure if we want to make a whole Instagram for the podcast. If that's something you guys are interested in, kind of like how Wes does with
the Top Shelfers Instagram.
Top Shelfers Instagram, kind of doing like those fun little things. We can definitely do that too. Just kind of email us, message us. But my Instagram, if you guys are interested, is Books, Coffee, Bees. I'm probably going to change it to something simpler. Not
to toot anyone's horns or anything, but her Instagram is quality.
It's aesthetically pleasing.
As someone who I don't really get involved in social media, I am excited when I see her on my feed because I'm like, I enjoy horror, I enjoy
Books.
mystery books and stuff, and she always has like your Lighthouse one that you just had.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they made a vinyl for it, but it looks fucking dope.
Yeah, it's a limited edition smoky one. I have fun vinyls. I have a lot of fun stuff. Not trying to boost me up here, but I'll be posting more on there when we're starting to I'll be giving updates on my research. I'll be doing more fun things kind of related to the podcast, but it is more of a personal one.
Right.
But if you want to reach out to me, to tell me something, that's kind of a good way. The email is probably the best because we'll probably have an episode where we go through people's emails.
Right.
But Wes had a really fun idea that we'll probably start the next episode is the Discord?
Yes. So if you guys are familiar with Discord, it allows for you to pretty much create your own server, which then you can build a community through, and it has different tabs, and there will be a True Crime Drunks tab where Holly and I will be on it. I have my Discord set up to notify me whenever that is. So if you are watching us live and you want to converse with us after the podcast,
we'll do an hour-long conversing where we'll both be on our computer messaging you guys back.
And I might even jump in there in a chat channel if you want to talk to me directly.
Yeah.
If you're watching the live stream and you're frustrated that we're not commenting back, that would be the outlet where you can go and get involved
in the conversation. We can continue the conversation mostly. Yeah. It's just hard when you're trying to talk about such a heavy subject and such a detail-oriented one to get distracted by comments. And we love your guys' comments. So if you could comment on the other ones, please do, because it makes the podcast so much more fun.
Absolutely.
This one is just a little bit harder to have that fun interaction, because then otherwise this podcast would be 5 hours long, because there's no way we can go through it all.
Right. We want to keep it short enough to keep people entertained throughout the whole thing, give enough information, and really get our point across, where with other top shelfers stuff, you're more used to the free flow type of thing. And this is going to be a more structured, serious, but also, of course, we're going to have our silly banter and different things along those lines. And
expect a very tasteful joke in the beginning of every episode, because listen, if I love true crime podcasts. I listen to them pretty frequently. I would listen to them 10 times more if there was tasteless jokes in each one of them.
Every single one.
That's why there's the four guys, the last podcast on the left, they're super funny. That's why I like them the most, because they have that fun, tasteless jokes.
It breaks up the dark.
Yeah. So expect that, because...
and if you're like me, one thing to not normalize, but one thing to make me more comfortable with things is tasteless jokes.
Tasteless jokes are so funny. It kind of softens the blow of what's really happening. Yeah. It really helps lighten the mood before we kind of darken it, but hopefully by giving our opinions and our fun facts, it'll help keep the podcast light enough so it's not super dark and scary. Because there's some true crime ones where I'm just like,
fuck, you just get done with it and you're like, oh, I need to go to bed.
You're like, I'm so, world sucks. But that's why I think our true crime podcast is going to stand out a little bit more, because it's a little bit more fun, light. It's not terribly, or not super structurally sound and solid, it's a formula every time, but we're going to have definitely more structure, but it's definitely still going to be light and airy. It's not just going to be informative, which is great. I love those kind of podcasts.
Absolutely.
But I wish I hear more about the things you don't hear about, like that guy who sells Gacy paintings, and
or direct quotes from these serial killers that
and
just make you go, what the fuck? You know?
Yeah, literally. I still cannot believe he had the balls to be like, clowns get away with murder.
Jesus.
Come on, man. Still so upset. But, yes, expect more to come. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks, July 4th.
And what's the 11-year-old serial killer's name again?
Mary Bell.
And
email us at truecrimedrunks@gmail.com. Website should be up by the time Mary Bell is. So then if you want to review some of the Gacy stuff, if we were a little too fast or not enough on one thing, I'm basically planning on trying to do a good article each person or event we do. Because we're not just doing people. We're going to be even doing cults.
Yes.
Things we're going to be doing anything you think of true crime, we'll get there.
Yes.
Eventually.
And if all the other social medias are going to be linked for Top Shelfers related things. the websites and everything will be linked in whatever description you're on. So if you're on iTunes, it'll be there. Spotify. Shout out to iHeartRadio. I'm glad you're finally listening and on board.
Yes.
You know, YouTube, everything where you typically know where to find your descriptions and your links, it'll be there.
Yep. So, till next time.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you for spending it with us.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Boy.